Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. As you know, or if you don't know, I will share with you ASK is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. I hope that this and each and every episode that we put out will provide you with that to ask, to always seek knowledge. This could be understanding a little bit more about yourself. This could be understanding others. This could be understanding the world you live in. This is just simply understanding, gaining some knowledge, and knowing a little bit better how to handle a situation, how to handle yourself, how to handle others. Many times, we just don't know at the immediate time and really wish that, well, we would have studied up on something and we could have handled it better. Have you ever been in that situation? I know I have. And that is why, well, it's actually pretty fitting of today's episode. The Resilience Bank. Daily deposits create big dividends. Now let's dive in to this week's episode. Hey, would also like to give a shout out to some of the behind the scenes people that help put this thing together. The spotlight I'd like to shine on today is my hair and makeup stylist, who is Camille Ocho. Thank you, Camille, for making me look my best for each and every episode. You do a great job. And I'm thankful. Resilience isn't built during the storm. It's built before the storm arrives. Most people treat resilience like an emergency fund. They hope appears when life gets hard. And the truth is, resilience is a bank account. Every day, you're either making deposits or withdrawals. And this is where it gets tricky. You really have to develop this thing kind of when it's not so important. Because, see, this is actually something that, well, you accumulate through, well, a few experiments. These are your behaviors, these are your habits, and they become your choices. Think of it more like a financial wealth system that you may have in your life, where you're always making deposits. You're never really going to use those funds, at least not in the most immediate future. But they're there just in case. They're there just in case you get a little older and want to supplement your income, like the 401k. This, what this does is it helps to develop emotional strength that allows you to kind of harness in through these continued investments. I remember when I was much younger that there was a time when, well, I was leaving the nest, as the kids say, and I was really kind of toughening myself up and creating some of those hypothetical situations where, what if? What if I was responsible for something? What if the answer was all mine and I had to come up with it? I even found myself doing this as a professional in my various parts of business that I endeavored in. Was I was always creating that scenario of what if? What if this happened? How would I handle it? And I can tell you that I found so many times by making those deposits, sort of playing that in my mind, sort of not creating the worst case scenario, but just practicing the what ifs. Many, well, and as I learned, many pilots have this same experience. They're constantly what ifing. From the moment they get behind the wheel of an aircraft, it's what if. What if we don't back from the gate? What if it doesn't take off? What if an alarm goes off? What if I'm in the air and something happens? What if there's an alarm? What if there's a notice? How would I handle it? Where was the airport we just took off from? Where's the next closest airport I could land? And this is just constantly going on in their mind. it almost becomes sort of a habit and they don't realize they're doing it. But it's part of this training that they have developed that's constantly looking at what ifs. And I would like you to help build this resilience for yourself by practicing those what ifs. What if someone has a conversation with you that's maybe uncomfortable? How would you handle with it? So, by having these what ifs already practiced, well, like I said, it's building up this bank account that allows you to then always have something on deposit so that it's not a surprise. It actually becomes something, well, you kind of expect it. And let me tell you, when you act from expectation rather than sort of getting sidelined with something, your disposition, your reaction, how you speak about that matter are transformational. And people will see that in you. That is a well developed muscle. That is something I would love for you to walk away from this episode with the resilience that honestly it took me about 20 years to create. I would like you to build it up in a much shorter time. I guess I would also like to add that each and every episode isn't theory. I'm talking from practical experiences and stuff that I've lived through, talking about life. What I promise you today is that you'll learn how to build resilience, a bank that continues paying dividends long after your initial investment. Are you ready to get started? Well, let's dive in. See, when adversity arrives, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your preparation. Resilience is this preparation in advance. I like to call this, and you already know, I love a good acronym. And so when preparing for this episode, you can bet there's an acronym. We're going to discuss the BANK framework. That's right, bank. You knew it was coming. I know you did. If you're a frequent listener of this show, you knew it was coming. B is build those daily wins. Small wins matter. See, most people only celebrate major achievements. Resilient people celebrate the progress. See, confidence grows from evidence. Evidence grows from action. So when you have each one of these small episodes where you've maybe practiced something and you had to come up with the response, it wasn't improvisation. You were acting from habit. And that, well, not only did it just sort of really put you in a good light for the opposing party that may have brought this to you and you handled it maybe in a better, or maybe you've had some experience with this person, so it was in a different manner. And they were like, hey, I noticed something different about this person. Let that be you. Or maybe somebody who doesn't know you, and this is your opportunity for what we call first impressions, and you handle this situation or objectivity in just a stellar manner because you practiced it. You said, hey, what if? And you managed to work your way through it. Well, it's through this action that you've given them evidence, well, that you can make things happen and that, well, that certain things don't bother you. Not that they don't bother you. Hey, it's life. It bothers everybody. But a lot of it is how you express yourself. And when people see those expressions and how you're portraying yourself in maybe a difficult situation, well, now that becomes admirable. See, we could even simplify this a little bit by just some of the actions you might do every day. One of the things I like to do is I make my bed. I know there's the old adage of you'll never complete anything ever in your life unless you make your bed, because that's the first completion of every day. Okay, said the military guy. But still, I think it's a good habit to get into while we're speaking of habits. So, first, making your bed. Pretty soon you're doing it, you don't even think about it. Maybe it's trying to be a little healthy. So, you take a walk on a regular basis to the point where you don't even have to convince yourself to do something. It's just, hey, look, it's time to go take a walk. Maybe completing a difficult task. When you've built up that resilience muscle of just looking at what's the most important thing I can accomplish today and do it. Not to mention, you're keeping promises to yourself. These are things that, well, you said you wanted to be a neater person. You wanted to be a little healthier. You wanted to always have something in the accomplishment line of what you got done today. Success builds on success. As we've talked about many times in neuroencoding, and it's really the same thing, where when you do have a success, remember to pat yourself on the back and congratulate yourself, because that's building on the next element of your achievements. A, audit your thinking. Resilience does begin internally. Remember, we talked about the what ifs. Audit your thinking. When you're constantly looking at what ifs and you're practicing the what ifs, as well as what are the important what ifs and maybe not so important what ifs, you need to certainly filter these out as well. And once you do, it becomes more habitual that your concern is more with the important what ifs than the not so important what ifs. Remember, I mentioned it before, and I don't think I can say it enough. You really have to practice. It's almost like going to the gym. You go to the gym a couple times a week, you work out, you're building a muscle. Same thing with this. You've got to do it a couple of times a week, maybe even a couple times a day until you get that muscle really dialed in where it becomes so automatic, you start saying, hey, that's pretty interesting. I'm thinking differently. My what ifs are more natural. And when they're more natural, that means they're working with you. Remember, like I said, success creates success. Your interpretation of events often matters more than the event itself. How many times have you gone back and, well, asked yourself, what story am I telling myself? Is this challenge permanent? And what can I learn from this? I can tell you I'm constantly doing that. It's almost habitual. When something happens in my life, I'm always asking, hey, what can I learn from this? Even something simple. Something simple like missing my, and I it's really not a good example because I'm always on time. In fact, I'm more than on time. But I remember there was a situation. I believe it was a conversation. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was a conversation. We'll hold the details back for a moment, but I remember it just didn't go well. And I remember stepping back from it. Not that it went poor. And I mean, what we talked about got accomplished. But I remember stepping back from that for a few moments just to be like, what can I learn from this? Because I don't feel like it was great. And I mean, the other person walked away and they were satisfied. But what could I learn from this? What could I have done different? And again, I want to be clear, we're not judging ourselves to say that anything bad occurred. I'm saying, what can we learn from this to just make it a little better, right? What kind of ingredients could we put on this cake to just give it a little more sweetness? something that not only is palatable, but something that really leaves that sweet, long lasting flavor of enjoyment with you, even after you've had it. Sometimes you may, in the same situation, ask yourself, is the challenge permanent? Is this something that you really got to, as I say, stick and stay? Or is this just a small adjustment that creates a much larger growth? And that is what you want to stay, is the larger growth, right? You start out with maybe some small weights at the gym, and all of a sudden you're really working on the iron. See, the challenge wasn't permanent with the small weights, but it was the growth step you had to take to get. So when you're looking at some of these challenges, keep in mind and ask yourself, are they permanent? And again, what story am I telling myself? I got to tell you, as I get a little bit older and certainly more wiser with more and more of what I'm teaching and sharing with people and the stories I get back from them, what story am I telling myself? Because remember, the stories we're telling ourselves are, well, the stories we're going to tell ourselves later. The mind is a crazy thing. It really is. When you get into neuroencoding, well, the reframing changes perception and creates new possibilities. So, what are you telling yourself? And when you're telling yourself that, and are you going through the action of reframing some of those statements, especially if you hear something you don't like? And because it's about yourself, I'm pretty certain you're not going to like what you hear. But are you reframing it to then change how you perceive that challenge or that situation? Because once you reframe it, now it's creating a new possibility, something where when you remember it and it comes back, you're going to see it as something different. That is growth. I'll share with you one of the actions that I habitually do now, but what I used to do is always either think about it or say it out loud. Why is this happening to me? And so I've changed that into, what is this teaching me? Because remember, like I've said, and I will say it forever until something changes, which I doubt, because the more I say this statement, the more it rings true. Life is happening for us, not to us. The events in our life are occurring because it's something that we need to work through, challenges we need to face for ourselves, and experiences that take us to the next level. Life is happening for you, not to you. N is nurture your network. Resilient people rarely are isolated. Resilient people have created a mentor system or created a system that involves mentors, friends, family, and coaches. If you don't have this system set in place, I would recommend the next thing you do is set up these very important four corners: mentors, friends, family, and coaches. Because each one of them are going to give you a different point of view. Mentors, they're going to tell you things you kind of need to know. Not that you want to hear them, but you need to know this. Friends, going to be a little bit more practical. Family, they're going to be a little bit more protected. And a coach, they're going to kind of yell at you a little bit. But once you set up these four corners, I think it creates a pretty good situation where you can thrive. And I will even add the fifth element of professional peers, people that you work with, people that you admire. Again, not necessarily mentors, but just maybe somebody that's kind of at your level. And I'm not saying to use or utilize people, but they're fair examples, as well as good practice material. Because you're on the same level, it's not necessarily offensive when you're practicing some of these things with them. And if it doesn't go well, well, you've discounted it for maybe doing it in front of your boss where that could cost you some merit. And I don't want you to lose merit, but certainly work and operate with your peers in practicing and trying some of this. Have those conversations with your mentor once they're honed in. Exercise a little bit with your friends and family. Remember, family is going to tell you the truth. They're also going to protect you. Use these as good examples to say, hey, what is this teaching me? To listen to family, to respect family, but follow my heart. I can share with you the strongest people, well, they ask for help sooner, not later. I, on the other hand, it took a little bit of time. I had to work my way up to asking for help because I always thought, well, I could do it myself. It was always within me. It's not true. I did have the resilience pretty much nailed down. What I didn't have is the network of support system in place. Something else I want to share with you, not really part of the 4 or the additional 5, but who are the people that help you recharge? Because some of this stuff is going to break you down. And you need to be able to know that you're getting broken down, kind of getting exhausted through many of these exercises, and you need to go recharge. So who are the friends, the mentors, the coworkers, the people you admire? How many times have you gone to an episode of a seminar and just got so pumped up that you come back and you're ready to tackle the world? Well, if that's you, you got to remember who's the one that energizes you and put that into your calendar and say, hey, you know what? It's been a couple of months. I really got to get pumped up again. So remember your 4 corners, your additional ask for help sooner, and always remember, dial it back towards the people that recharge you so that you can come back again to meet with your 4 corners and your 5th. Let's move on to K. Keep depositing. Resilience is not built by one heroic moment. Yeah, you're going to have a couple of those. You're going to pat yourself on the back. You're going to say, wow, that was amazing. I practiced it in my head. I rocked the conversation or the event. I came out in shining armor. But you got to remember that this was built through repeated deposits prior to. This was built by you paying attention to your sleep and exercising and writing in your gratitude journal and learning through those 4-cornered individuals. Those conversations that you had, you walked away and said, hey, how can I reframe that? How can I adjust that? How could I approach that differently? So constantly learning. And remember that this is what you're doing. Remember, you're also creating your spiritual practices that help keep you grounded. I'm not saying anyone is better than the other, but you do need to dial into your spiritual center, to your heart chakra, to the voice within. Follow those spiritual practices. Reflection. Take time at the end of the day to refract. What was the day? What did you learn? What could you reconsider? And certainly those acts of service to help keep you grounded and know that we're all part of humanity. These are your continuous deposits. And remember, the goal is consistency, not intensity. Consistency always wins over intensity. Even small deposits add up over time. Remember, Between the promise and the payoff, there is a process. And this is it. The bank. BANK. Now, you may find yourself, and I would be remiss if I didn't go in this direction, so we're going to dial it over to the other direction, just so that you're aware, because this is a teachable moment. There are things like resilience withdrawals. You're going to find yourself in this direction once in a while, and you need to recognize that it's kind of pulling you back. Just like the toxic 10, there's always something trying to slow you down from going in a particular direction. And as life, well, as Les Brown says, life be lifing, well, it's happening. And some of these withdrawals can be that negative self-talk you have with yourself. Remember, how do you keep that in your memory, that event? Are you reframing it? Are you experiencing a lot of chronic stress in your life? You know, this can cause you to start having withdrawals and not focusing on the deposits. Especially if you're stressing out about other things, well, you're not focused on your daily routine. And that can affect your deposits. Isolation, when you find yourself just self-loathing and being, well, really only in touch with yourself and not practicing and being with your network, that is a withdrawal. Another one is, lack of boundaries. A lot of this practice that we discussed earlier helps you set up those boundaries and recognize those boundaries to say, you know what? I think that conversation might have stepped over what I stand for, might have compromised my truth. And knowing that someone has done that, the conversation has done that, again, it builds your resilience to walk away from that with a learning experience. But if you start to diminish what your boundaries are, well, then you're not learning within them. Another is comparison. When you're constantly comparing yourself to, well, gosh, so-and-so really handled that a lot better than me. I wouldn't have been able to do that. See your self-loathing and you're diminishing yourself. And that, don't compare yourself. Remember, you're on your own journey. You are doing your own thing. You're at your own learning curve. And sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're behind. But as long as you're daily practicing all of these resilient techniques, you're still growing and building. And so is someone else. Sometimes you're a chapter ahead, sometimes you're a chapter behind. But you're still reading the same book and you're still learning. And at the end of the day, I think all of this just makes us, others, and life much better. Remember how I said, find those that recharge you, whether it's maybe going to a seminar, maybe going to a group, sometimes a religious experience, maybe your retreat, something that lifts you up, fills you up, lets you feel good about life and yourself. All of these recharging are recovery moments. And if you're ignoring those opportunities to go recover and you're constantly in this learning, depositing, and giving phase, and you're not recharging yourself to maintain that spiritual, mental health, well, those are withdrawals. You can also find yourself overcommitting. Again, preoccupying your time. It's a small withdrawal, but I'll tell you what, when you're not making those deposits on a regular basis, it can begin to affect your resilience. And I want you to understand that you need to build that sense of knowing your depletion prior to, similar to the gas gauge in your car. Great example. You see the needle going down, but you wait until the light comes on, almost challenging it. Well, now you really need gas. Now you really need to find that place to fill up. And I'm sharing with you, don't wait until the light comes on. Notice where's that sweet spot, if you will, that the needle falls on when it's time to fill up, to get recharged. The toxic 10 often become major withdrawals from our resilience account. Stress, overwhelm, self doubt, fear of failure, and procrastination. All of these can also add to those withdrawals. I'm sharing this with you because I don't want you to get to that point where the light comes on. I want you to recognize the toxic 10 and or some of the withdrawal symptoms that I mentioned. Because if you can stay within that sweet spot of the fuel needle, say a quarter tank, and be able to refill again, well, then you're not depleting all of your energy. And you're able to work a little bit through the process while you're recharging. Because if you go to dead, your cell phone, your smartphone, right? How many times have you looked down and it's just at single digits on the battery? And you go to plug that thing in and charge it up, and it seems to take forever. And you're like, oh, 10%, 15%. Why is this taking so long? It's because it's starting from almost nothing and trying to build up. And I know there's some of you techies out there that say, you know what, I got this charger at one of the online shopping places. Don't want to name anybody specific, and it charges it in 30 minutes. It sure does. And if you've ever noticed that when you do the fast charge, it doesn't last as long, and it dwindles right back down to that single digit. And you will also notice that when you go to touch your device after plugging it in for that short 20, 30-minute stint, it's also very warm. See, it's not healthy. Sure, it's a great replenishment when you need a full tank and you got to move forward. But to do it with that extreme on a continuous basis, you're just like your device, you're going to get hot. You're also going to throw off the cycle a little bit. It's just not going to be as effective or as efficient as you want it to be when you're recharging and rebuilding. Reminder, every day you're making deposits or withdrawals. So when you find yourself having a series of events that are withdrawing, or maybe you find yourself battling the toxic 10 every so often, remember those are withdrawals. And remember that you're having these amounts of depletion and you need to get back to the bank, the BANK. Remember to build daily wins, audit and reframe your thinking, nurture your network. Remember, you've got a host. You've got 4 corners, an additional 5th, and a bonus. Utilize them. I didn't say use, I said utilize them. They're there. And if you don't have them, create them. Create some friends. Create someone you confide in. Create a coworker that you can work on some of these techniques, some of these what ifs, and throw that conversation to them. See how they react. It may be a learning curve for you just to see how they handle a situation. And when they go, hey, what was this about again? Oh, I forgot. But it's okay. It's good. And you walk away, but you've learned something by how someone else reacted. And you really didn't burn any bridges. You really didn't have any confrontation. It was just an experiment. Something you tried, something you learned, and something you moved on from. Remember, every day you're making deposits or withdrawals. So choose intentionally what you're doing. I invite you to download the Resilience Bank Builder. Identify one daily deposit you'll make this week. Track your deposits for 7 days. And I welcome you to share your biggest takeaway using hashtag ResilienceBank and add the tag at AskAdamLive. Life will always make withdrawals. Your job is to keep making deposits. Build your resilience bank, and future you will thank you tomorrow. Now let us all go out and make it a great day.